what makes you, in your mind, the best qualified candidate of the group that we've got so far?
You know, I never really pay attention to what other people's qualifications are and who's running for what. I tell people in public service and in my life, you know, serving in the military, I've been a CID agent in the Army, narcotics detective later, serving 10 years as a public servant in Baton Rouge. You know, you do it for your reasons, and it really has never had to do anything to do with anybody else. So I don't really pay attention to what other people's qualifications are. I'm doing it because I want to serve my state. I've served my country. I've served my communities. I've fought on these streets of America. I fought every day in Baton Rouge. You know, I'm a fighter for people. That's what I do. This provides me an opportunity to represent people from a different seat than what I've been the last 10 years. I think I'm well prepared for it. I've learned how to fight fair, I think, but I do believe that in no other time in our history of our state do we need some people that are bold and willing to stand up and fight for the people and the taxpayers of Louisiana.
Now, you've made it clear throughout your time in the legislature that you do tend to point out things that you think are wrong. Your predecessor, your elected predecessor to this office, former state treasurer John Kennedy, was very much considered himself a watchdog. He did a lot of barking. You've done a lot of barking in the legislature. Do you intend to continue that pattern should you be elected?
You know, let me just say this. I don't look at the things that I've done in the legislature as barking. I've pointed out very clearly some of the problems that face government that ultimately fall on the back of the taxpayers that have to be fixed. I've clearly said, you know, that we have a spending problem in this state. We have a priority problem in this state. And I've often told people, show me the list of priorities for the state of Louisiana by any administration. I have not seen that in 10 years. As far as John, you know, I think he did an outstanding job at elevating the position of treasurer to where it's become extremely relevant to most citizens of the state. I think most people now expect the treasurer to be that spokesman for them, to watch out, to watch their back. You know, and I did that. And as long as he's done it, I've done it just as long, just from a different spot, in a different seat. Certainly, I've said before to the media that as one member of 105, the media really didn't care what I had to say, to a large extent. But you know, from that seat, from that position, now all of a sudden, you're relevant. I don't think if I was signing up to run for my House seat today that 7, 8 members of the media would be covering it, you know? So I don't expect to be any different or say anything different. We're gonna keep pushing the same things that we've pushed for 10 years. I purposely broke out the hawk pen today. You know, a lot of people don't know we had the hawk pens. I'm gonna be that person. It's not gonna be any different. I'm not gonna shy away from pointing out things that are wrong that would benefit the taxpayers of Louisiana. I'm very much looking forward to it because I can take my ideas and my thoughts to the next level, and that's why I'm running for state treasurer.
Well, and we've all asked this of the other candidates as well, but you get a bigger megaphone as treasurer, but the place where you can actually make more changes to the budget and financial policies of state is actually in the legislature. So what do you see as the treasurer's role in addressing the state's financial problems when it's really limited in the scope that it has authority over that kind of stuff?
Look, here's the bottom line. You looking at the guy that's probably was one of the hardest workers in the legislature, and not publicly, behind the scenes, working with my colleagues, both sides of the aisles, with the staff, with secretaries of this government, across the board. I personally probably put together more meetings than probably all the legislators combined when on the topic of trying to fix our spending problems in this state. I've helped educate my former colleagues to a point where they just will tease me about it. But that's the kind of effort it's going to take. It's going to take meeting with the Secretary of State. It's going to take meeting with all the departments and figuring out how do we get the infrastructure in Louisiana to a level that's affordable for the taxpayers of Louisiana. That's really what it comes down to. But I've done that.
But you see the treasurer's role as being the person who
Absolutely.
can facilitate that?
Look, let me just tell you this. A leader's a leader, whether they're cutting their grass at home or washing their car at home. They lead, and that's what I do. And whether it's tackling the budget, tackling education issues, I think the leaders of this state need to step up and lead, no matter what the topic is. Just so happens that I know what the problems are with our budget. They aren't easy to solve. We have a spending problem. It's simple. Everybody makes this big deal out of it. But the problem is right in front of us, and the solution is simple. It's the biggest lie that you hear. You know, it is very simple. We spend too much money. We spend more than we have. We spend what we think we're going to have. That's not difficult, but it is going to be hard to stand up and fix it. So look, let me tell you, I was in Oil City yesterday. I met a young entrepreneur who just bought a company, and within 2 months of buying that company, he had to lay off 65 people out of 100. You know, he looked me in the eye and he said, "Why?" How did he say it? He said, "Do you not think that was hard? You don't think it was hard in a matter of 6 hours to lay off 65 people who all live in my community? Why can't state government do that? And why do I have to do it? And why does the state continue to grow?"
But again, I feel like those are the messages that Treasurer Kennedy spent a long time hammering. And I think you would argue and have argued that not a lot has necessarily been done in that direction yet. So what makes you different as treasurer in getting that accomplished?
Well, look, it's a process. And the one thing I have learned over 10 years is that it's a process. I've had arguments with just about every person in leadership position that participates in government in Baton Rouge. It's a process of learning, teaching. You know, when I first got here 10 years ago, I believe there was probably about 20 fiscal conservatives in the House of Representatives, maybe 25. Today, it's probably 50. It took us 10 years to get there. So I think the economy is going to force this to happen. And the problem with the process is it takes time. It took us 6 years to vote down our first budget, knowing that we had all those problems. 6 years. So hopefully it doesn't take us 6 more years to fix it. I think if you walk around that building, and you know this, 8, 9, 10 years ago when I was there with Brett Guyman, nobody wanted to talk about the budget. Heck, I had to explain the problems to most of you guys. You know, so today, everybody talks about the budget. Everybody sort of understands what the problems are. So we just got to keep plugging down the road. You got to win one battle at a time. I think the treasurer will be a very strong influence on how do we get to solve these issues. I think what I bring to the table is credibility with the legislature, because I will go work with them. I will use the assets of the treasurer's office to find solutions.
This is not going to be an inexpensive race, especially raising your profile and your name recognition statewide, since you are known locally, but not necessarily in North Louisiana. How do you propose to do that and generate some enthusiasm for the race, and for you in particular as the candidate?
I've been in North Louisiana probably in the last 10 years, I don't know, 25 times or so. You know, I've been across this state talking about budget for years, not just the last 12 months. Common Core took me across the whole state. I have a lot of friends up in North Louisiana. was there for 2 days yesterday. I'm no stranger to those towns. I'm no stranger to the people. I'm not really concerned about that.
Do you have a budget in your mind for how much you think it takes to be able to win this race?
Oh, not really. We're just gonna raise what we can raise, and it is what it is.
Any idea when you may go up on the broadcast media with ads? Are you planning on doing that, or are you planning on running an internet-based race primarily?
We're gonna do some before October 14th.
Fair enough.
I'm going to ask, I understand about the budget and everything, but
Yeah.
what experience do you bring to handling the revenues and the debt of the state?
Well, I told a mayor of a town yesterday who, we were talking about how small her budget was compared to a $30 billion budget of the state of Louisiana. And she says, man, I don't know how you do that. I said, well, it's just zeros. I was taught in first grade, 1 + 1 = 2. And as you add numbers to it, it's just adding and subtracting. It's not that difficult. We make this big production out of it, but it's pretty simple. It's math. In my business, we have invested millions of dollars. We have helped put to work thousands of people. We've had good days and bad days. You know, one of the reasons I'm so passionate in Baton Rouge, I have had to go home, and I have had to lay people off. I've had to close a business. I've had to have those difficult conversations with the bankers on how do you balance, how do you live within your means. I've had to do that personally. Very difficult, very emotional. One of the hardest days of my adulthood was laying off a cousin of mine who had the same name, one of my closest cousins, while I was in the legislature. You know, my wife and I have fought through very difficult times in this economy through our construction business, our residential business. So I understand what the state's going through. I'm just going through it at a different level. But the numbers are the numbers, whether you're talking about $1 billion or $1 million. It's just a few more zeros. But the math all works the same way. You just need a bigger calculator.
What are you going to tell Wall Street about Louisiana's finances and why perhaps we ought to have a higher bond rating?
Let me tell you how you make Wall Street happy. You get control of your debt. Period. No different than what you do in your life. If your debt was out of control, you wouldn't be taking notes right now. You'd be doing something else. You know, Louisiana has to get its debt under control. It has to be more predictable. That's what Wall Street likes. That's what my banker likes. The banker wants to know that I can control my debt, which means I have to control my spending, period.
Everybody who's come up here who's a candidate in this race has said it's their experience that sets them apart. Everybody's talked about their financial experience and their own experience in dealing with the legislature. What do you think you have that's any different than Senator Reiser, who was in charge of a money committee, or Angel Davis, who was commissioner of administration? I mean, you'll all have familiarity with the state's budget, obviously. Mm-hmm. So what's different for you than they are?
You know, again, I'm not going to stand here and tell you what's the difference between myself and Angel Davis or Neil Reiser or for any other candidate. I just know this much. I want, as a business person, as somebody who puts people to work daily in this economy, I want a leader who I can absolutely trust, that's not a deal maker, that has the best interest of the taxpayers first. And when they go behind that door and close that door, not have to worry about what that person is doing and what kind of deal are they making. I don't make deals. I don't like the political gamemanship. I will talk a lot about how do we cut the political, what I call corruption that goes on in Baton Rouge with the capital outlay process. You recently saw the articles about the vetoes and some of the projects that the governor has vetoed for no other reason than he didn't like the votes of those legislators. That has got to stop. I don't like that whole process. the treasurer is the chairman of the bond commission. I think he's gonna have to use his influence to change that whole process. I think I'm the only one who probably has fought to change that process over the time, but both people who you mentioned have been part of that.
Let me ask you, how do you see the dynamics of this race changing now that Julie Stokes is out of the race?
I can tell you it hasn't changed my dynamic a bit, other than this. My wife and I were truly and honestly heartbroken for her and her family. You know, I'm come from a family with a lot of women. I'm the minority, and you know, cancer is just a brutal, brutal disease. I don't know any family that hasn't touched, and you know, I haven't said this in front of anybody, but I'll say it now. You know, you immediately start thinking about what would you do if that was you going through it, and I don't know what I would do if my wife was going through it. So I try to just march on. It's very unfortunate. She's in my daily prayers. But as far as what I do and the dynamics of my team and what we're doing, it's not going to change anything. We're working every day. I don't pay attention to who's in the race. We go to work, and I expect my team to do the same.